Welcome to this special episode of the Max Afterburner podcast. And this episode is in English, and you will see why in just 1 minute, because I have the great honor to welcome a very special guest, Mr. Charlie Valentine, former United States Marine, also having done several tours of duty, mine-clearing organizations, and working as a private contractor, and now turned entrepreneur, solving one of the big crisis when it comes to humanity right now, and that is mines and mine clearing. So a big welcome, Charlie. Welcome to Max Afterburner.
Yeah, thank you, Max. Really appreciate the invite to the podcast as well.
Absolutely. No, so you are the first foreign military guest we have on, so it's very interesting to hear about that. And I think just to start things off, I think all Swedes, especially all Swedes listening to this, they have seen several movies about Marine Corps boot camp and everything, and you've actually experienced it live. So tell us about that, just to start.
Yeah, it's not as close as what you might see in the movies. It's pretty close with the intensity and the screaming and the yelling and the running around. But it's not like Full Metal Jacket or anything like that. It's just very strict compared to most branches, at least for the United States.
Yeah. The Marine Corps has a reputation, at least, and I think I also think it's true that you have a very, very high standards when it comes to how you conduct yourself and how you view yourself, and that of course brings a lot of morale and esprit de corps. I'm happy to get into that. But before we get into all the details and the nitty-gritty, you had an extensive career. So let's start at the beginning. Who is Charlie Valentine?
Yeah. So I started off my kind of career as an adult in 2009 when I joined the United States Marine Corps. I did about 3 years in field artillery, and the rest of the time of that was in EOD. So during my career in EOD, because that's like most of what I did, the field artillery stuff was fun, but pretty boring, other than sitting in a tent and firing artillery shells. But yeah, my first duty station as EOD was in Iwakuni, Japan. So I was stationed there just south.
Just what is EOD for all the listeners?
Yeah. Sorry about that. American acronyms all over the place. So that's explosive ordnance disposal. The closest kind of comparable thing on the outside would be a deminer, whether commercial or NGO.
So basically removing all kinds of dangerous goods that are explosive in nature, basically.
Yeah, and especially for the United States EOD technicians or explosive ordnance disposal technicians, we cover the whole spectrum of explosive weapons and chemical weapons, biological and nuclear. So I was trained in handling conventional munitions all the way up to aircraft bombs and cluster munitions, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons as well, and the rendering safe or making safe of those munitions and neutralizing them, whether for disposal somewhere else or on site.
So it's a very, very broad threat, basically, that you need to be able to handle.
A lot of at least from the humanitarian commercial side, it's very stovepiped into some of the disciplines that you can cover down on. For the United States military, we take a very broad approach to it. Our school is 9 months. We have another, at least for the United States Marine Corps, we have an on-the-job training program too that covers that. Total schools and pipelines, I'm probably looking at like 4 years straight between follow-on trainings and everything else. Pretty broad.
Yeah. And obviously it has shifted, and we'll get into all of that later on. But from the international sort of mission, like typical Afghanistan, Iraq mission, where there be IEDs, so improvised explosive devices that basically insurgents create homemade bombs, and now it's turned back to the more conventional armed forces against armed forces with all of that. But we'll get into all of that, and it's a very, very interesting topics, and your company EOD Dynamics also is trying to help out with that problem. So we'll get into all that. But how do one get to decide to I'm going to join the Marine Corps, because it's a unless in Sweden we have a conscript service, so you basically, if you get selected, you have to do about 1 year. But for you guys, you sign a contract, I think, and you are committed for more than 1 year.
Yeah, so typically they're 4-year active duty contracts, and then an 8-year total obligation. So I could been called back in my first 8 years, all the way up until year 8. Yeah, for me, I don't know what happened, but I just wanted to join the Marine Corps super bad. Most of the kids I grew up with and everything, and most of my wrestling team that I wrestled with in school ended up joining the Marine Corps, and it just had some sort of allure to me for a long time. And so, yeah, I just 16 and a half, I went and signed up for the United States Marine Corps. Was in the delayed entry program for a while just because I had to wait to graduate school, and my parents wouldn't let me graduate early. But yeah, as soon as I turned 18, then I actually shipped off to boot camp and started that.
So you decided already at 16 years old that you were going to commit to several years of being in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, to the chagrin of my parents, they weren't too excited about that.
Yeah.
They're like, "Why? What? Where is this coming from? And could you talk to other branches first?" And yeah, so I went and talked to other branches, knowing full well, like, I've already made my decision. I'm not going back on that. And yeah,
wow,
I was committed since then.
Well, I'm just looking back to myself, as you always do, right? But when I was 16, I mean, especially as a young man, you are, or not even a man, a young boy at 16, you're not that smart. Your brain is not developed. And I mean, I just find it crazy that you get to that you get such a conviction to make those life-changing decisions, for sure. I mean, that's impressive.
I'm not even sure, at least for me, like, I knew for a long time I wanted to do some sort of service, kind of scars coming out of being a kid growing up after 9/11 in the United States.
Yeah.
But I'm also a knucklehead and pretty stubborn, to be honest. So as soon as I made my decision, like, that's probably what I was going to do anyways, at least a 99% chance. So, yeah, kind of dumb luck and and yeah, larger cultural scars, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'm also interested, you guys in America, of course, you can't speak for every American, but you mentioned wrestling, so there's some sort of sports background, of course, and I guess wrestling, how I see it from outside, from Sweden, is that the wrestling is like one of the absolute hardest sports when it comes to discipline and training and matches and everything. Do you think that has played a role as well, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, some of the people that I consider my mentors and still think about today are like my wrestling coaches. I played other sports as well. So I did cross country, really enjoyed that. So long distance running. And I did swimming for a little while, but I am not a very good swimmer, which is quite confusing considering I joined the Marine Corps and ended up on a boat for a long time. But yeah, I think that aided a lot to it. And then also just, for lack of a better term, like getting hard and being a tough punk kid, getting thrown around all the time and up and downs and all the other drills that we would do. I felt like it just kind of conditioned me over time to, like, this is what I want to do. I want something. I want to struggle. I want to fight. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you basically, as soon as you turned 18, you went to boot camp, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, we have 2 boot camps in the United States Marine Corps, one in San Diego and then one in Parris Island. I went to Parris Island.
That's the Full Metal Jacket part, right?
Yeah. I believe so. I think it is out of Parris Island. Yeah, real swampy, ton of mosquitoes, sand fleas, which coming from kind of like the Northeast, I didn't even know that was even a thing until I was getting bitten sitting on a parade deck in a position of attention. But yeah, went through that and graduated 3 months later, and then went off to Marine Corps Combat School after that.
So you do the boot camp, everybody does that, I guess. And then do you get to decide where to go next, or is it just you go there, or how is that process?
So typically you sign a contract coming in for a particular job. after boot camp, it splits off into two kind of fields. So infantry goes to their own, they immediately go into SOI, or School of Infantry. And then everybody else also goes to the School of Infantry, but they have a condensed combat school. And so they train on just basic rifleman tactics and what you need to do. Because a lot of the Marine Corps boot camp side really has nothing to do with like military tactics.
No.
Like you learn some
discipline.
of that. Yeah. You learn some of that core base knowledge, but it's all about discipline, doing what you're told immediately, understanding things, solving problems, and kind of knowing rank structure and all that. But yeah, and then after combat school, everybody else that isn't infantry then goes into their military occupational school. So for me, it was Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I became a fire direction control specialist. So I figured out how to get rounds on target.
Yeah, I mean, how did you come about choosing that specific discipline or that specific sort of niche, or how you want to call it?
The needs of the Marine Corps, to be honest. So I signed a contract thinking I was going to be a FO or a forward observer. So calling in like artillery strikes and naval gunfire and stuff like that. What I didn't read was the fine print of that like 40-page contract that I signed, which said like, hey, you could be anything within the field artillery field.
Okay.
And I had fairly high math scores and poor eyesight. So they were like, yeah, probably not forward observer. We're going to push you into doing math and stuff in a tent.
Yeah. Okay, so that's exactly what you signed up for, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, and how was that training then? So you were basically back where the artillery was shooting from and calculating so that everything was getting on target. Basically, is that a layman's?
Yeah, so I was with the actual batteries. I was working with the M777, so the towed artillery, as well as the 120 millimeter mortar system. That we'd gotten at the time I was coming in. So yeah, forward observer would call in the grid wherever he was or the direction he was looking, and then I would do all the math to get the rounds on target with a fire direction cell that we'd work with.
Well, that must be super stressful because, I mean, obviously the forward observers, I've been working a lot with JTAC, so Joint Terminal Air Controllers, when I was flying, and not in a combat zone, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to see it. But it's typically quite a high stress environment, especially if you have like two troops in contract. There's always like an urgency to get the rounds and the munitions, whatever you're shooting, at the target with high accuracy and as quickly as possible. So I guess it must have been a lot of pressure for you when you were back. Like,
yeah, I would say for like the first 6 months, it was actually like a lot. I didn't expect to go into anything like that. I thought I was going to be like carrying a gun, just like, oh, blow this guy up kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it was like a completely different stressor I wasn't really expecting. But after for Marine Corps field artillery, like you're in the field all the time. I think of the 3 years I was there, I was in the field a year and a half of that.
Wow. Yeah.
And then deployed for another year. So I really had like 6 months back, or like 6 months to do anything else. But yeah, so I mean, after those 6 months, because that operational tempo was just so high, it just kind of became second nature. I wouldn't say I was super awesome at it by any stretch of the imagination, or great. But when I looked at, because I actually got to choose my career path when I hit my 3-year mark, and I just kind of looked around and I saw no career progression for me that I was going to actually enjoy. And I was actually just in charge of all my friends at that point. And they were handling everything because we all came up together. We all trusted each other. It was a solid team. And I was like, I would say for like 3 of those 6 months that I had off, it was me just sitting in charge of all my friends and going like, does anybody want like coffee or something from the store? I guess I'll go get that because everything else is handled. But yeah.
But that's awesome though. I mean, that's just it just speaks to, I mean, obviously the teamwork that you had done building up that team together, and the immense trust as well. I mean, as a leader, that you trust your subordinates with all that. I mean, that's because you're the one getting hanged if something happens, obviously. So Can you speak a little bit about that? Because I mean, I'm very interested in leadership as well. What do you think about what you have to say about like leadership in the Marine Corps and in your team specifically at that time?
I would say for my team, it was more based on like kind of tribal trust than leadership. We ended up moving into a like an operations shop after our kind of 3 years and everything. So it's fairly low tempo, a lot of paperwork, just making sure people did math right to get certain boxes correct on the in the impact area. But leadership in general in the Marine Corps, I would say, is pretty good compared to where I've seen elsewhere. The structure of just like how they articulate what mentoring is, what coaching is, the process in which they kind of look at, hey, how do we actually develop Marines? If you actually look at the publications and then look at like the leadership pubs as well, it's pretty comprehensive. And if you're just at the bare minimum, just following that, like you'll be, I would argue you would be significantly better than most people.
Yeah.
just by reading that stuff and trying to apply it in the best way. I would say it also produces some of the worst leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's a very wide spectrum, but it's usually on the extremes. Either they're absolutely wonderful, they're great. People I would even follow today outside the Marine Corps, they asked me to come on board somewhere, to probably the most toxic individuals I've ever met.
Mm-hmm. What do you think makes that change? How does one become toxic and how does one become great as a leader?
That's kind of like the $1 million question, right? I honestly think it just comes down to being humble, understanding that human beings are valuable at every level, no matter how great or wonderful you are. And where I've seen people kind of diverge is when they kind of lose their head and they think they've kind of made it, or that they don't have anything to learn from literally everyone around them. Or the people that are truly humble in the best way, are directive, can actually see a vision and execute. Those are like the true leaders that I appreciate. So I think it really boils down to humility and knowing that everyone around you can teach you something, even if it's just the private in the back who got here last week. There's something you can learn from them, and developing that individual as a team and the people around you as a team instead of being selfish.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ego is such a fascinating concept, because I think you need at least some ego, like in the sense of, I really want to succeed. I really want the team to succeed. I really want us to win. I really want us to be the best. But at the same time, coupling that together with the humility that you're talking about, because you will need everybody and you need to learn from everybody, and you're so dependent on everyone. So it's a sort of like I don't know, catch-22 or paradox or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, like something on a weird kind of pendulum where you need to kind of swing back and forth between like 100% confidence in what you're doing and direction to like humility and understanding and everything. And I think you can, as long as it's swinging in a normal way, I think that helps shape good leaders. I think if it gets stuck on one side or stuck on the other side, you either have someone who's highly toxic, highly self-centered, or you get someone who's, for lack of a better term, soft and not really making decisions or making it, at least from a military perspective, like too touchy-feely when we got to make hard decisions quickly, depending on the situation.
Yeah, because you can't always, there's not always time to get advice from everyone. Like sometimes you just need to make like that split second decision, right? And it's a fine line to walk for sure. And and I also think the military sometimes it appeals to a sort of person that might have a little bit sort of Machiavellian traits or whatever to call it, and I guess some of those people end up playing the game and like making it up in the ranks, and that might also be something. I don't know if you have any comments on that. That's my own theory.
I think so. I think like just in general, like the idea of the military and the idea of fighting in a war and the idea of things being hard, like it attracts very similar personalities. And I believe that organizations that do it well mold those personalities into like one kind of fairly standard product at the end of the day, which I think the Marine Corps does really well. But then you have human beings, and I would say the hardest thing I've ever had to do on planet Earth is manage human beings, because you ever seen like those cups with like slime in it?
Yeah.
And like you squeeze it and that's how I feel like it is managing people, and like trying to like, okay, we just need to roll down the down the hill, and you're like squeezing out and things are slipping all over the place. But yeah.
Disarming a bomb or flying a fighter jet is sometimes, it just seems very easy compared to managing humans sometimes. So I totally understand what you're saying. Okay, so but after 3 years, you got to decide on basically what kind of specialty or where to go next, and you choose to basically go a whole other route than you were at.
Yeah, so I looked at kind of my options, and I was like, it's not that the people here aren't great. It's not that I don't appreciate what this job field kind of offers. It just didn't appeal to me anymore, because I understood that I was going to start doing a lot of staff work very quickly.
Nobody likes staff work, so
exactly right. And so I kind of looked around to other jobs that required a lot of maturity, that kind of allow you to get back in the field and do that kind of stuff on a daily basis. And so I looked at counterintelligence, and I looked at EOD. Being a fairly new guy in the military, I realized kind of after the fact, I knew nothing about any of those jobs. And so I just applied for it and everything. Funnily enough, EOD got back to me and said, hey, we want you to screen. So I screened and everything, got selected, and yeah, my kind of path went from there. To the point, like, I was so lost in like what these jobs did that I 100% thought like our schoolhouse, where I was going to actually get trained to be an explosive ordnance disposal technician, was going to be like on the same base that I was, and was only going to be 9 weeks. And then when I got my order, they were like, oh yeah, you're going to Florida in 2 months. I was like, Flo, what? Like, what are you talking about? They're like, yeah, EOD school's in Florida for 9 months. No one told you this? I was like, I didn't get a briefing on any of this. I was like, I guess I got orders, so that's what I'm doing now. But yeah. And I had some kind of drive, at least for the EOD side, a little bit. I had a lot of friends that either went into the Army or in the Marine Corps that got hurt during the GWAT era, the Global War on Terror era, and kind of seeing that and knowing like, I feel like I can actually do something about this. I qualify for this job. Have a proclivity to doing like technical things and electronics and all that stuff. So there was some sort of drive. But yeah, it was almost by 100% happen chance that I fell into doing this kind of work.
And this must have been then around 2012 or something like that, or?
Yeah, 2012.
Yeah. So exactly in the middle of I guess Afghanistan was starting to heat up again, and Iraq, I can't remember, but I guess IEDs and sort of homemade bombs was probably one of the absolute highest contributors to casualties for the United States and for all allies, basically, I guess, at this point. So obviously very, something very, very high up on your, and how did the screening go? Was it like extra tests and intelligence, or what sort of?
Yeah, so just to like basically qualify, we have like a skills quotient that we use to be able to figure out like, hey, what jobs are you going to be kind of best for? So with a general technical score I had, I qualified for it just fine. We had to write a 1-page essay in an hour, and then a whole bunch of different skills tasks. So it was everything from like hook and line procedures and understanding how ropes and pulleys and all that stuff works, and demonstrating like you can actually apply that in a meaningful way instead of getting tangled in the rope. There were some memorization tests of like what were the common features among these items. So it wasn't so much like, hey, tell me what letter was underneath the blanket or something like that, like a Kim's game kind of situation. It was more like identifying trends, identifying systems. And I believe we also did X-ray interpretation too. So we were told to set up an X-ray. They kind of walked us through it. We got an image, and then we just had to line up a laser to hit a thing. Not understanding like what the tool kind of did other than it shot something. So we had to like understand at least spatially, because it's 2D image looking at a 3D space.
Yeah.
How would I actually shoot this thing using the laser as a guide? We also had a screening, like an interview kind of screening. So there were a panel of, I believe, 8 EOD technicians, all the way from like the new guy that showed up last week to like the most senior person. We sat down with them. They each had about like 3 questions to ask, and then kind of like some conversational time at the end. And then at the very end, they would, it'd be about 2 weeks. We had some physical tests too, but that was kind of child's play. If you can like run or have a pretty decent like running score, you can do pretty much any other stuff. Yeah. And then about a week after that, or 2 weeks after that, you actually got a notification back to see if you were actually selected for OJT. And then your stuff went up to Marine Corps proper, the headquarters, and they allocated and ordered you to report to that unit.
And is it common to change paths or trajectories like after 3 years? Is that common? Or
I would say it's more common than other times in your career. That's kind of like the time where, like, if you're going to change a job, you're probably going to change it there.
Okay.
And for the United States Marine Corps, both the counterintelligence thing and EOD was one of the things that you had to be at least an NCO at the time, or a non-commissioned officer at the time, in order to even move into them.
Okay, so you needed to have experience in the Marine Corps or before you actually could apply for a job. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And your rank at this time was sergeant or something like that, or corporal?
I was a newly promoted corporal.
Corporal, okay. Yeah.
I think I was corporal for like literally 2 weeks before.
Yeah. So you just made NCO basically. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Very interesting. Yeah, I just looking back at my own tests for fighter pilot, and we also have in the Swedish Armed Forces, we have different tests for different branches, of course, like that as well. And they sound pretty similar, even though you always have like sort of tweaks when it comes to what you're going to do. But it's usually some sort of spatial ability, general intelligence, and it's I guess there's common themes here. Okay, and then you went to Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a fun surprise. Yeah, I was in Florida for almost 12 months between. We had some time where we were waiting for our class to pick up, and then I actually ended up rolling out of one course, one portion of the course, and then getting recycled, which is actually fairly common in the EOD schoolhouse. You're looking at least, this was kind of back in the day, they've done a lot to kind of clean up the attrition rate. But at the time it was like anywhere from like 65 to 75% failure rate. So you would go in with a class of, like 25, and you might graduate with maybe 5 of the same people.
Okay. That sounds high, very high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the schoolhouse is actually ran by our Navy, but all branches go to it. And for some very interesting reason, the Navy seems to have like schools that are very, very strict and huge attrition rates. Because like any of the nuclear submarine schools or carrier schools, they also have like a huge washout rate as well. But yeah.
Yeah, I just looking back, because we talked about that a lot on the podcast, because in Sweden we changed. We had so many people that crashed and died especially during the 50s and 60s and also 70s when it comes to fighter aircraft. Mm-hmm. So they changed up the entire system. Basically, they increased the difficulty to pass the screening before. Mm-hmm. And then once you got accepted, they basically, instead of, if they had 8 spots, they didn't make sure that 50 started and then attrition down. Instead, they tried to get 8 people to start, and then change the mindset of the teachers and everyone that you're not there to fail people. You're there to actually try to coach them and to make them get through it. And yeah, that's sort of like a mindset thing that I changed. Of course, there's still people that need to leave for different reasons, but yeah, I mean that just puts a little bit of pressure on the entire course, that that's such a high attrition rate, and it puts like extra stress. I guess it's a highly technical training, and then you put on extra stress on top. I guess it can be a little bit too much perhaps at times.
Yeah, and it's, especially for some people, and I would say like even during my time, like I don't know whether they do this intentionally or just a product of the culture that comes out of like being an EOD technician. But there was a lot of emphasis on like, are you even good enough for this? Like, what are you even doing here? Okay. Like it would be like the smallest mistake, and they'd be like, "What? How did you even end up here?" And you're like, oh, wow. I just forgot my pencil. And you're like, oh, it's in my bag. And they're like, you didn't know your pencil was in your bag. Garbage. And so yeah, there's a lot of like stress, and I think from a cultural standpoint, like it's anywhere else you would see it as like kind of toxic, but it really produces, I would say, really highly motivated people that are working in a like just like fighter pilots, very high stress environment, very low failure rate. Like you make one mistake, it could be 100% catastrophic. So yeah, I think it does a good job. Yeah, and even we used to do the exact same thing where like it would be like success was failing as many people through the course as possible, like from an instructor perspective. And what they've done now is actually do a little bit better job at screening across all the branches. Look at, hey, how can we actually prepare anybody going through of like either core competencies or just like exposure to some of this stuff. Because you'll come up on some of these tools, and like I grew up in a family that was very like crafty, built homes, worked on cars and all that stuff. And I came across some of these tools, and I was like, I'm really good at mechanics. I have no idea what this does. This is not compute. What is this? Yeah. So just even having exposure to that and kind of opening your scope a little bit, I think has helped out quite a bit. Yeah, and with not having as high attrition rates and having a higher, better quality product at the end of the day.
And there was sort of, because obviously you guys, like in the United States, you have more of a, you have the schools, you have more of a, we jokingly say you have more of a factory approach. I mean, you're so many people to have to go through that you have to have it much more standardized. In Sweden, we might have like courses that have, 8 students per year in total. They just get together and do it like one. So we can afford to be a little bit more flexible in that sense, which is of course a strength and a weakness, because sometimes you get to invent the wheel like every course a little bit. I guess as you guys are more prepared to actually have people running through, or not running, but getting through. So how was the course like laid out a little bit, just as an overview?
Yeah, so the first part of it was, I believe it's changed a little bit, evolved over the years. But it started off with like demolition theory, basic fuse functioning, and then you started going to different categories. So it was like fuse or projectiles, landmines, guided munitions, bombs, all of that, all the way until you pretty much covered all the conventional weapons or conventional weapon categories. And then you moved into chemical, biological, IED, which it might have been before that, and then radiological and nuclear weapons, and then you graduated after that.
Wow.
So it's about a month for every section that we covered.
Yeah, you need to be a quick learner then, I guess.
You actually have a test every 3 days. Wow. And so, which obviously there's 5 days in the week. So you run into like a whole bunch of weird times where like, and you can't take anything home or anything.
No, of course.
No study material. So like you would go, Thursday, Friday, learn a lesson. First thing Monday morning, you're like, I really hope I pass this, because I haven't been thinking about it. I've got nothing to reference. But the days are pretty long, so they like highly encourage study hall. So like a 12-hour day would be like a normal day at EOD school.
Yeah. So it's quite intense. You basically have not much free time at all during these months of going through the course, I guess.
Yeah, during the week, absolutely not.
Yeah. And once you end up graduating, what happens then? Do you already know where you're going, or is that?
Yeah, about the last 2 sections of the course, that's when you start actually getting your orders to things. The failure attrition rate at that point is like something like, I don't know, 4% or something like that. It's extremely low, and it's usually even those attrition rates are typically attributed to disciplinary problems.
Yeah.
Or getting like seriously peered out where your instructors don't like you, the students don't like you, you just happen to be there.
Attitude problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, you get orders from that point, and yeah, I got orders to Japan.
To Japan, and what happens in Japan then? You basically just trained, so you have done the course, and then you get to you get your unit, or do you do more courses when you get to your?
Yeah, so I got to my unit and everything, and then I had a couple of courses during that time as well. Usually it was like retrain or qualification courses on different things. So we did everything from like home and explosive courses to electronics courses, advanced nuclear detection technique stuff, and yeah, then our basic. So there, I was actually a part of a base team. So we did base response was my primary mission. So yeah, you do your mission and you do your training, and do schools.
Yeah, and do schools, and sort of. So you're on the base, and you also have readiness to respond to a sort of like if there's a bomb threat or there's something going wrong in an exercise and someone needs to disarm the bombs or whatever like that.
Yeah, so I was on an airfield, so we focused a lot on keeping the airfield up and running. Hey, if there was attack, how do we actually like solve this problem in a meaningful way? How do we coordinate with emergency personnel? So mainly the military police, the hospital, postal service, all of these kind of functions on base. So we looked at everything from like a possible IED threat all the way through like conventional munitions attack and base recovery.
Yeah, I mean, also what can happen is if when you come back with a misfire when you're flying, or if there's God forbid like a crash and you have live ordnance as well. Obviously, as a firefighter rescue person, when you go up there, there's a risk for the rescue personnel as well. So a military base has a lot of things that that go boom. So yeah, I guess there's a lot of things to prepare. And how was that? Did you like that? I mean, I guess you wanted to get more into the field and then you get onto a base. Is that what you were looking for, or?
Yeah, it was a kind of a mixed bag. So I ran my first EOD call there, and then we also do a special mission support or important mission person mission sports activity stuff. So I flew around everywhere from New York to Tokyo to all over the place, supporting those activities with the United States Secret Service, so the people that protect the president and foreign dignitaries and stuff. Yeah, that time was super interesting. It wasn't like a typical time. Most people go to like the companies or like some sort of like operational force, and going to like a base thing and an air base at that was like, I mean, you're talking about maybe 5% of the Marine Corps does that kind of thing. It was good because I got exposure to a lot of like staff functions that I hadn't like had exposure to. So like I didn't have to deal with ordering ammo or demolitions or anything before that. So I got exposed to that and a lot of the career advancement stuff that I just didn't have purview on before. And then my first EOD call was actually to some toys or some porta-johns. And they were like, yeah, there's some munitions out there. I'm like, okay, this does not sound like a good day. So I walk out there, and because there was a lot of construction on base, so they pulled up everything from small arms munitions to bombs that people had buried or other ammunition that people had buried over time or had sunken into the ground. And I'm walking down there, and I'm like looking around, and I see all these like blue rounds, like all over the place. And I'm like, and it wasn't like a this blue. It was like it almost looked like copper. How copper kind of blues and greens
oxidates
from oxidation. And so I was like, what in the world is going on here? Like, and the oxidation just like doesn't look right. And they were Type 99 ammunition. So they're World War II standard battle rifle ammunition. And yeah, so I was like walking around like looking at this stuff, and I'm like, I call up and I'm like, hey, I think it's these small arms. Like, I've identified as this. Like, what do you want me to do with it? They're like, pick it up. And I was like, oh, okay. And then what? They're like, well, we'll take it out for disposition on the island, because we had an island where we blew stuff up at. And I was like, okay. So I go to like pick one up, and then I realized like the oxidation that I thought was kind of fluid in consistency.
Great.
And yeah, that turned out to be the shittiest EOD call I've ever done. Yeah. So essentially what happened was, because this was also at the end of the day, so somebody found all these rounds, picked them up, threw them in the toy or the porta-john. Somebody was like, hey, you can't do that. You need to get them out, because if the Americans find out that you threw them in the porta-john, they're going to be real angry with you. And so some poor guy, because I ended up finding the porta-john like where the trail of poop water led to, and I'm like, so yeah, some poor guy had to go back in there, scoop them all out, and threw them all over the parking lot. And I was like, this is my grandiose ideas of being an EOD technician and everything, and this is what I'm doing as my first EOD call. You have got to be kidding me. But yeah. After that, that's when I was like, I've got to go somewhere where we're actually doing something. So I'd also applied for Marine Corps Special Operations Command to be a SOCS-E, which is a Special Operations Capability Specialist, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, and then went through that pipeline and everything.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that. So I mean, we just joined NATO in Sweden, and this whole thing about Special Operation Forces as SOF, and what is a Special Operation Forces, and we have a couple of different like very, very small units, especially compared to the United States, obviously. So MARSOC is, I mean, you have Marine Raiders, you have MARSOC. What's the difference there, just for the listeners?
Yeah, so the original like Marine Raiders were just like a light infantry force that was highly specialized in getting onto islands in the Pacific. That kind of evolved over time. You had Force Reconnaissance, which was never a part when SOCOM actually stood up, so Special Operations Command stood up. They weren't brought into the fold because at the time the Marine Corps Commandant didn't want anyone special. We are Marines.
Okay. Yeah.
Take it or leave it,
yeah,
kind of attitude. As the years went on and everything, especially with the global war on terror, they were using Force Reconnaissance platoons and reconnaissance platoons to do a lot of special operation-like missions without the special operations money and training and everything. Yeah. They were highly trained in what they did, but it wasn't like they were never built for that.
Yeah.
That led to, I believe it was Detachment 1 out of California, which was essentially Force Reconnaissance Marines pulled off, plugged into SOCOM, and go, you're now Special Operations Marines. That eventually led to the Raider Regiment and MARSOC in general, Marine Corps Special Operations Command, not necessarily the regiments or the troop providers in there.
So they decided to, because obviously the Marine Corps needs their own like recon for their own tasks, and then they decided to take a part of that and create a special SOF unit that then went under the command from these your Special Operations Command, basically. Okay, yeah. And that's where how did you come about getting there?
Yeah, mainly it was I did that call that I was talking about, and I was not very happy. And I was like, I really, really like this job. I hate what I'm doing. And if I ever go back to a base like this, I will be the saddest person on planet Earth because I don't feel like I'm actually like making any difference or like doing anything truly productive. So I applied, put in my package in. It just kind of sat at our command for a while. And I only needed one signature, which was the Sergeant Major's signature. So I was like, well, I mean, paperwork's paperwork, and it's just supposed to get done one way. It doesn't say I have to have another person figure it out. So took the paperwork back, got Sergeant Major to sign it, glowing reviews. This devil dog's awesome and wonderful in every way. Typical Sergeant Major talk about somebody who's just at least not in trouble. And that paperwork got sent out. I then got yelled at because I sent in the package without these additional signatures, even though they weren't required. So anybody applying for the SOX community that now requires this extra signature, you're welcome. Okay. So that package got sent up, and they're like, well, I mean, he didn't do it wrong, and he qualifies, so let's actually bring him on and see what he does. A couple months later, I went into the training pipeline for that. Went through that whole selection process, everything from like super long hikes to advanced electronics training, trained for raids and reconnaissance operations and all this other stuff. And then at the very end, got selected and then got pushed off to MRB, or Marine Raider Battalion, 1st Marine Raider Battalion out of San Diego.
So is this a typical way into MARSOC, that you have your specialty and you apply and then you do tests and then you get in? Or do they also take like people from no experience and also train them? Or
so there's 2 pipelines for it. There's CSOs, which are the critical skills operators. They're like the special operations equivalent of like a Green Beret or a Navy SEAL. And then you have all your capability, special operations capability specialists, which are all the extra jobs that typically are attached directly to a team. So you have dog handlers, JTACs, you have and communication and intelligence. So instead of like in a special forces kind of team construct, they have like their different 18 series. So it could be like 18 Bravo, which I believe is a team sergeant, Charlie, Echoes, and all that. So instead of turning everybody into a Green Beret or a CSO, you have CSOs who do most of the fighting, all the kind of more special operations stuff, and then you have capability specialists that plug in and enable that team where and how they see fit.
So is there like a divide then in how you operate together? Like how's the team mechanics when it comes to that?
So that's actually like super interesting. So most of them actually of the SOCs belong to the support group, and then they get tasked to a team. For us, during that period of time that I was in, we were actually with the Raider Battalion, and so I was immediately plugged into a team as soon as the deployment pipeline got started up. So I had the benefit of at least like being on the team, not the new guy. Yeah. And although I was a special operations capability specialist and not like one of the operators, I at least showed enough face time to like build immediate trust and stuff like that. But yeah, sometimes it can be real hard on those SOCs coming in from somewhere else because their training pipeline is completely different, much shorter as well. So yeah, you do get like a weird team divide of like, oh, these like enabler nerds, like they suck. Like, well, come on guys, like they're really good at what they do. They're not really good at what you do. Yeah. And we wouldn't ask you to do what they do. And vice versa. But for the most part, usually by the time like we actually like go on deployment and everything like that, everybody's had time together where that kind of tribe mentality comes in and you actually get attached to like a number team and you're doing stuff as a team.
Hej på er, Max Villman här, och behöver du eller ditt företag min hjälp att komma vidare och låsa upp nästa nivå, ja, då ska ni klicka på länken nere i beskrivningen och boka ett kostnadsfritt strategimöte med mig där vi ser om det är en bra matchning för oss att arbeta med varandra. You went there for a couple of years, and so what was the typical, did you go on deployment, or what was the special, like the typical?
Yeah, so it was like another like year and a half of just like straight training pipeline. So I went to more electronics courses. I went to more homemade explosive courses. I went to advanced explosive technique stuff, so breaching doors and all that. And then chemical, biological, nuclear stuff, more of the same thing, just a little bit more advanced. Jump school as well. And then I finally fell in on an actual rotation. With that, I actually then deployed with a special operations team into Southeast Asia and did work there primarily in like a advisory role and supporting exploitation and render safe procedure stuff in the southern Philippines.
So you were deployed and you helped train their special operation teams and yeah. How was that? Was it more of what you were looking for?
Yeah, it was. It was still kind of strange because it wasn't Iraq, it wasn't Afghanistan. The environment was completely different. Most of the time, it was either 100% permissive or semi-permissive environment. So no real true big threat most of the time. And even when there was like a true big threat, we had enough of a presence that like if someone was to attack us, they're going to learn out real quick that they messed up. But it was great. I was actually at one point in time I was the only EOD technician in country, which allowed me in country for Marine Corps, my actual unit, in the Special Operations Task Force that was there. So it allowed me a ton of latitude as a very junior guy to do some really like high level big stuff, travel a lot, make a lot of contacts, and also like manage forensics, the forensic process from these raids and stuff that were going on for, essentially like the size of Sweden in landmass. So it was really great. I got a ton of experience. I had a great team that supported me. Got to run my own missions a couple times. So that was great. And it was extremely, extremely rewarding. I still talk to a lot of the people that I met there. And obviously still keep in contact with the guys I served with.
Oh, great. And how was that? How long was that deployment for?
That was about 7 months.
Yeah. And basically working almost nonstop, I guess.
Yeah, like again, like a 12-hour day was like a nice day.
Yeah.
And then other days it was like 18 hours, or if there was like some big operation going on, like it could be like, all right, we're taking shifts sleeping and supporting where we can. Yeah. And then there were other times where it was like nothing. Yeah. So it was like 2 weeks of like, I guess I'm just going to sleep in my bed till 12 because we don't have anything going on. But yeah.
That's a classic military, like hurry up and then wait a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then I'm just looking at your CV here. So you went there for 3 years almost.
Yep.
Yeah. And eventually you changed again, I think, to...
So during the way that they cycle people out is typically associated with... they have a time cap for a lot of the special operations capability specialists. So they go back to the field. And also at that point in time, I was like, hey, I'm not staying in anymore. So I didn't have a deployment cycle I could actually like really, truly jump on. So I was told, hey, we can offer you to go back to the conventional forces. You can help train there, get your team leader time as well. Cause most of the time we were sole operators within the team. And then also we've got some other things that are going on that we would like you to kind of check out and help with. So I came back into the conventional forces, started my getting out process and everything. Trained a platoon of guys on how to do a whole bunch of stuff. things that weren't necessarily specifically soft related, but because I had all the experience and was able to actually be exposed to that in a pretty high rate, I was able to actually take some of that stuff back, provide some of that training kind of expertise to them, temper their thinking about what their job was and how they can actually provide more benefit to the force at large. And then I was also offered the opportunity to go work with Naval Information Warfare Center, doing a whole bunch of different weird projects, from like building communication systems to robots and electronic warfare and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then, shortly after that, I got out.
And why did you decide to? You've been there for 11 years. Is that that's pretty long, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah. To be honest, it boiled down to a couple things. One, toxic leadership. I just kept on running into very similar personalities that I did not get along with, that I felt that were toxic. I could not find a good way to like work in that environment, and knowing that like every 3 years, which was a typical rotation into another unit, I was facing the chance of just having another just horrible leader again. And I was also getting divorced during that time. So I was like, you know what? I'm just done. I'm going to cut my losses with this whole thing. I enjoyed my time and everything, but I've got to move on to different and better things in my life. Says the man that essentially has made this his entire career up to, to this date. But it was mainly like a change of scenery. I knew I could do better things outside, and that I didn't, at least I would have the latitude to go, you know what, I don't want to work here anymore, or chase a passion project, or just completely reinvent myself and what I was. Because at that point in time, like I was so indoctrinated and like held my title and my position with such like esteem, like that's who I was. I was an EOD technician. I was a Marine Corps special operations capability specialist. I was a staff sergeant. Like I held those as like my identity. Yeah. And then when I looked outside, like I actually was kind of scared, and I was like, this is just a brutal storm that's going to produce the person that I hate at the end of the day. I'm not any of those things. I'm Charlie. So that kind of helped me decide like, hey, I need to move on and kind of separate myself identity wise from all the things that I held so dear. Because it was, in my kind of view, it was kind of super toxic. It's a super toxic relationship. It was super great. I got awards and congratulations and all that along the way too. But there were like severe ups and downs, with either people or things that were going on or relationships in my life. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's many ways we can go from here. This is, I recognize so much of what you're saying. I think for people who are perhaps had civilian careers their whole lives, I don't think everyone understands how much of your own identity, if you're in the armed forces, especially several different kinds, like your identity and who you are as a person, what your job, everything sort of becomes one, and that can be great. Of course, it creates this morale we're talking about, the esprit de corps and everything. But at the same time, like you said, Charlie, it can also be, if you ever were to lose that, or if you get into a life crisis and start questioning things, it also removes a lot of this base from you, like in a very, very harsh way. So it's and I mean, how did you mentioned a couple of things, but how did you actually start looking at yourself and like, okay, I'm not gonna be an EOD technician, staff sergeant, all the awards and everything, and I'm gonna be something? I mean, that must have been, you mentioned, must have been so scary. How did you actually get over that threshold and like, yeah, I need to do something else? It might be too personal
like,
now.
No, it was kind of like me actually, like when I joined the Marine Corps, of like I was just a knucklehead, and I still am, and I just made a decision. The way I looked at it was like, in some ways it was too comfortable, and it was also too toxic, and I was like, I've got to make a change. I don't like this. I don't like this one bit, but I've done a ton of things that I don't like and gotten through it. This is a time for me to actually make a change, because if I continue doing this, I'm just going to get stuck in a rut, personally, professionally, mentally. And I do not want that. I want the next challenge. And I don't need to be beholden to this title and thing that I like held so dear all the time. So as soon as I kind of recognized that and like had my kind of like epiphany of like one night of like, what am I going to do when I get out? I was like, no, that's time for you to get out, Charlie. Like, you need to go do something else. It's not, this isn't everything. There's an entire world out there. Go live it.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. And then you decided to get out, and you had like you mentioned a sort of a process where you like did some things, but you were mentally like starting to prepare for the exit a little bit, I guess. So how was your process then about what am I doing now? Was that always clear? I want to continue to work with IED stuff, or?
No, it was actually so after my experience with Naval Information Warfare Center and working on all these projects and working with scientists and stuff like that, I was like, I really, really enjoy the technology that's around this stuff. And maybe I don't necessarily want to do like EOD technology or IED technology or any of that stuff. Maybe I just want to be an engineer, or get in. And I also very much appreciated my time at MARSOC. So the kind of like political environment, like understanding international relations and working with that. So I kind of looked at like maybe engineer, maybe do something with the State Department, maybe do NGO work or something. And as I was saying, I was in divorce and I was super broke. That is very expensive. And I was like, well, all those ideas have gone out the window. I need money, and I need money like yesterday. And in the United States, we have this wonderful thing called the military-industrial complex, which provides great paying jobs to veterans who have nothing better to do than what they did before. So I immediately like fell into that. So I started working for this. I came back home to like Virginia, where I was originally from, and the State Department has a training facility, and so I worked as a counter explosive instructor. Explosive countermeasures instructor. They say it all funky. Yeah, so that job opened up. I got a call and said, hey, we've got a job for you. Do you want to come out? And I was like, perfect. It's only like a 2-hour drive from my parents' house, or my family's, where we're originally from. I guess I'm going to do a 2-hour commute every day. So that's what I started doing. And I did that for about 3 months before I actually got a call from Booz Allen Hamilton offering me a job in Europe.
And was that also easy to move to Europe? I guess that's sort of a new reinvention of yourself. If you decide to move, it's not the next state. It's a whole other continent.
Yeah. So at the time, and actually like still now, my significant other's Polish and a German speaker. So obviously like she couldn't be in the States during that time. And COVID and everything else that was going on. So as soon as I got offered that job, I was like, well, this is a really good opportunity for me. And it gives us the opportunity to actually like live together. So that's what we started doing. Came to Germany, started living together, starting our life out here. I started my career with Booz Allen Hamilton. And yeah, like I said earlier, doing counter ID training, equity, technology stuff.
So you did a lot of, you trained other people that were going into like conflict zones or
yeah, at the State Department, that's primarily what I did was whether there was like embassy staff or like family or whatever, or even some of their security agents. I provided all that explosive training for them, and all the special effects that were associated with the training events that they were doing. So I kind of call that time like my my like movie star career, because I did a lot of fireworks, more fireworks than I've ever done in my entire life. But yeah, it was a really, really cool opportunity that was afforded to me. But as soon as I saw this job with Booz Allen Hamilton and doing, there was a program called the Counter ID Training Integration Cell. And they had a very broad mission of what they were expected to do for the Department of the Army, so headquarters Army. and they were pushed out to every COCOM or combatant command.
What's that?
And
That's the
what's
COCOM.
that?
COCOM.
Yeah, COCOM, combatant command.
What does that mean?
So, yeah, sorry. American acronyms coming out again. So that's how the U.S. looks at its force structure and command structure globally.
Okay.
So we have commands for Europe and Africa. We have commands, well, actually, on a bigger level, we have command for Europe, a command for Asia, a command for Asia, Indo-Pacific region. Okay. We have command for Africa, South America, as well as the Middle East.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the branches, the Marine Corps, Army, Navy, Air Force, all have subcomponents that are underneath those combatant commands. So being at that high of a level and having the experience I did with technology and training partner nation forces and everything, it was a really, really good fit. I feel like, and it was and obviously them. And it also provided like a lot of opportunity for growth, a lot of new experiences within Europe working with partner nation forces, because most of my work was not like within NATO. It was solely America, going out and doing great things. So yeah, being exposed to that, I look forward to it a lot, and yeah, I got a lot of great experiences out of that.
So you trained. Who did you train? Was it more of an advisor role, or was it more of a training?
Yeah, it was a mix of a lot of different things. So I was a guest instructor at the NATO Counter IED Center of Excellence in Spain. That was a really rewarding time. I trained a lot of U.S. forces as well, everything from counter IED to sensitive site exploitation, because my soft background. Got to participate in a lot of conferences, talk about the technology and how we were kind of shaping things. I was given the opportunity to do a lot of like intelligence synergy work, for lack of a better term, looking at like, hey, this is the problem set. How do we actually get this into training? And how do we actually take these explosive devices and the characteristics of it and put out a meaningful product that people can actually use the lessons learned and the experiences from other people to be able to drive a better intelligence to action to training pipeline.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a lot of what I did, was looking at the intelligence piece and how to actually match that with training.
So if some sort of new device comes out, how do we quickly make sure that our fighters or warfighters, that they have the newest technology that they can train on and understand? So that's okay.
And looking at it from like, so here are all the technologies, how do we actually apply it to the problem set? Because the biggest issue that the United States was running into at the time was the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were winding down-ish. And they were looking at the problem set as, okay, we did all this stuff during that time. We gave a ton amount of treasure to all these technologies that were going to save the day, and none of it actually like had a true big impact. Okay, it saved some people's lives, but in reality, when your truck's getting hit with a 200-pound bomb, even if it's a mine-resistant vehicle, like you're in one piece, your brain is not. Yeah. So what do we spend $250,000 for like one seat in this truck for? So I was actually looking at like, okay, if human beings are identifying this mainly through their eyes, mainly through their actual training skills, maybe technology or product solutions isn't what we actually need to focus on. We actually need to focus on the training, and how do we do that in a meaningful way going forward, instead of just like arbitrarily like, this is counter IED, and then hoping that everything's good after that. So trying to create a more dynamic curriculum that actually was reflective of the threats that people were going to see.
Yeah, I mean, I do some Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and sometimes there's talk about you defending specific chokes, and if someone has a choke applied on you, how do you defend yourself? But the best way to defend is to not get into that position where there's someone actually applying a choke to you. So I guess that goes for IED, counter IED measures as well.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's like a huge pitfall that all of NATO has fallen into is like, oh, there's this new like special IED that has a switch. It's like, no, it goes back to principles. Everything can kind
Stay
of be put in
away.
the framework. Yeah, stay away. And it's either a victim, time, or command device. And there's actions we can take against those things. Or just don't end up in that situation to begin with, because it's not like they're like, I don't know, randomly popping up in the environment. Like there's a person behind it. There's a supply chain. There's all this other stuff that actually shows a footprint. And trying to get that across and articulate that to people of like, no, you can walk. You just need to be aware of where you're walking, and employ these methods instead of just like, there's a pressure plate. What do you do? It's like, that's not how life
That's
works,
not step one, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's this shiny new object syndrome as well, right? You want to work with the latest technology, and I mean, it's not sexy to tell people to avoid the stuff. It's more sexy to create this super expensive thing that protects and disarms, and of course, I mean,
and you see that with drones now, and like what's
Absolutely.
being used in Ukraine, and you're like, guys, you understand we've been dropping things off aerial platforms since like the 1800s, probably even earlier than that. Like drones are just an employment method. The reaction and everything is the exact same thing as if it was a MiG in the 70s that we were facing. Like, but yeah, everybody's like, oh, counter drone expert. I'm like, are you? You could do the same thing with a balloon. Maybe not as effectively, but it's same problem set.
That's true. And then you went into some more NGO type work after that.
Yeah, I was offered a position in Danish Refugee Council as a technical field manager, and then was actually within that offered the opportunity to set up the first IED defeat team that they had. So actually training a team that was trained originally in conventional munition disposal and traditional mine action or like landmine removal into an actual team that could operate in a, as much as I don't particularly like this term, asymmetric warfare environment post-conflict. So train that team up, I wouldn't say from start, but from like about 50%, finished up their training, kind of certified them on their own level, got accreditation so we could actually start clearing in Iraq for this stuff, and then actually started clearing sites around Mosul, or actually right outside Mosul, Iraq.
Right. And also some work with Bombs Techs Without Borders. I hadn't heard about that term before, but I mean, why not have Bombs Techs Without Borders as well?
Yeah, right. So I'd actually worked with them for quite some time. So I was doing kind of social media analyst stuff. I enjoy like the data science and what social media can offer when it comes to like reach and understanding how people are interacting with the information that they're getting. I mean, in reality, it's the world's biggest spy collection agency, but it's cool to be able to like see that data, manipulate that data, analyze that data, and then actually see results coming out of it. It's way less mushy of a concept than most things. So I was doing work with them, and I still talk and speak with them, probably like every quarter, about like, hey, how can we plug in? How can we help? With them. Yeah.
And then how did you come about starting EODynamics then, your startup?
Yeah. So this is another kind of funny story. So when I was with Booz Allen Hamilton, I went to a conference and I was talking about spatial computing. What does this mean? How we as Booz Allen Hamilton at the time were leveraging some off-the-shelf technology in order to produce better training aids, and how we can actually use that as a intelligence collection pipeline to feed a whole bunch of other things in the larger intelligence cycle, as well as within the training management, training development cycle as well. Spoke about that, and then somebody came up during the conference on the video and gave literally the worst presentation I have ever seen. It was a technological nightmare, but it was super cool. And that was my co-founder, Daniel Kinstrand. It was there were so many things going wrong. So they were like streaming with the headset while on Microsoft Teams, but then they had to like, it was something like they had to like also then restream that to like WebEx or something, just because of the architecture of how the thing was.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? And then the even worse thing is that the internet connection just like wasn't good. I'm not sure which side it was, whether it was the conference side or their side, but everything was like super glitchy. So it was like car on fire, like fire extinguisher. There's like a mine over here, and there's just like for like 30 minutes. And I'm like, this one is hilarious. This is funny to watch. Two, I feel so sorry, but this is really, really cool technology. So I'd seen like augmented reality before, and seen it kind of applied, but how they kind of showed it and demonstrated everything, I was like, this is exactly what I would like us to be able to do. And I've never actually seen it in this way or seen the HoloLens at the time. And Daniel was running HeroSite. So at the end of the conference, I reached out to a whole bunch of people that I appreciated their lecture and what specifically they were talking about. And Daniel was like, we'd actually really love to get into this field, and we have like no expertise like in it. We just can display things. And this was kind of like our reach out to like demonstrate some technology and what can be done. And I said, yeah, that sounds great. I would actually like to do a project with you guys and see where it goes. We'll do a demo, even if it's just my personal one and doesn't go anywhere. Like, it would just be cool to see it. And so we worked on an initial project that then kind of spawned into another project. And then they were like, hey, we've got some time, some extra work. Do you want another project? And I was like, I mean, this is just like Charlie Valentine collecting projects with like no meaningful way to go anywhere with it. But yeah, sure, I'll do that too. And that kind of allowed me to test and feel out like, okay, where's this technology applicable? How can we actually use it? And start building a framework around what EODynamics was to eventually become. So we were a company under HeroSite for a while, and then we split apart from them, and then we're now our own standing company that uses a lot of the initial concepts that we proofed within HeroSite into what we're doing at EODynamics right now.
Yeah, talk a little bit about what you do with EODynamics, because it's I talked to Daniel, your co-founder, before, and I mean it's really cool, and it's using augmented reality and intelligence, and yeah, get into it.
Yeah. So what actually like makes us different and what we do is we actually leverage open source intelligence. We use spatial computing technologies and some proprietary workflow processes to take things out of the battlefield, bring them into a 3D environment. So whether it's just a 3D viewer, augmented reality, or headset application, or even a 3D printed model, we take all that information and then produce things out of it. So the way that we look at it is like we've componentized the problem, and then we just plug the stuff that we need into our other applications. So we have a mobile application, so it's like a augmented reality ordnance library in your pocket. So instead of lugging around an entire shipping container full of stuff, most of the time people just need to look at it. They just need to understand the size. They need to understand how things kind of shine off this object. What does it actually look like? So we demonstrate that through a mobile application.
And just to take a quick step back, Charlie. So let's say you're out in the fields. Obviously, this is EOD. So you see a part of something. You believe this might be some sort of improvised explosive device, or a mine, or a bomb that didn't go off, basically. And then you pull out your phone and you use your proprietary technology to get a better augmented reality view of how this thing actually looks for real.
Yeah. So what we can actually do is like we proof of concept this a couple times, is if I can just pull a video, real short video, it doesn't have to be high quality, it can be super compressed. We can take that video, use that information that's pulled from the camera sensor, and turn that into 3D data. And then using other search processes in the background, we can kind of piece together the picture and go, this is what this mine looks like, and put that into our training applications. Most of our stuff is actually what we try to focus on currently is before action's on. So ideally, we wouldn't want somebody like walking down on a mine and then going like, I'm gonna break out my application and see what it looks like.
I'm standing on the pressure sensor right now, like with the movies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what we're actually trying, because a lot of EOD stuff is like there's new and so many things out there. Like for a human being to remember that's just like random rote tasks. Like I could teach a monkey or a dog to do something very similar. What we're actually trying to do is teach principles. So and provide a training environment in which those principles can be taught. Like what does an anti-personnel landmine look like? Okay, how do we differentiate the different types? Is it a blast? Is it a bounding frag? Is it any of these other subcategories? Because even if you don't know what that munition is, like the nomenclature and exactly how it works, if you can at least make generalities from its construction and everything, then you can actually start developing render safe procedures. You can develop your safeties. You can make exponentially more informed decisions, even if you don't even know exactly what that munition is. So that's what we try to focus on with a lot of our products, is providing that environment in which that can occur with really high and very high detail and a very quick turnaround time from thing on the battlefield to training on it.
So is this for people who are clearing mines, or people who are in areas where there are mines or other bombs, or who's your target? Yeah, let's say customer, but
yeah. I would argue everyone.
Yeah.
Because I want a huge customer base. But for our mobile application, that can be honestly used by anyone. Whether you're a journalist, just understanding what these things look like, what they're shaped like, kind of a little bit of contextual data about them as well, to a new recruit or a conscript in the Swedish army, just wanting to understand what are the explosive things being used in another battle space, all the way to the EOD technician learning today what this thing is, or seeing something that they've never seen before in actual 3D and 3D space.
Yeah.
We have some plastic models as well. So we utilize these to train fuse concepts. And so pretty much every product from the mobile application then starts getting very specific into level 1 through 3 EOD training from a IMAS or International Mine Action Standard perspective. And we primarily are focusing on those individuals for our core products.
So basically, your vision for the future is that everyone who is in an area where there could be a mine threat has access to your app, because everyone has a phone, right? So you don't need special equipment, so you can get that sort of understanding what to avoid, what not to do, what is this, and then you're also trying to build up to more of a training platform, even for people who are actually working with ID as their profession, basically.
Yeah, everything from the EOD technician, and arguably like even like from the combat engineer perspective, like that's the kind of niche that our company really focuses on, mainly just because that's what we have our experience in. But from a big picture, what we're doing is we're taking open source information and providing training packages for those things. You could really what we're doing, you could overlay on anything that you don't need to touch or move. But you need to place a tool. So it might even be like we could walk around and get a video of a train, and then take that train and our headset and all the things that we measure and do, and go, okay, here's a package for training welders how to, in augmented reality, weld this entire thing from start to finish. That's kind of like the bigger picture of what we do. But what we primarily focus on is those combat engineers, anyone in a conflict zone, and EOD technicians from a product and product fit perspective.
And obviously, we touched on this briefly before the interview, but this is a growing problem when it comes to contaminated areas where there's explosive, and it's not just isolated or insulated to the front line. It's actually something that, I mean, you can shoot mines and also bombs that don't go off. I mean, it's a growing threat, and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and this is obviously like kind of our core of why we even approach this in the first place, is the requirement for EOD technicians and humanitarian deminers is only getting more and more every year. There's been campaigns of 2025 landmine-free world. You're talking about current estimates in Ukraine, 750 years with, I believe, 500 teams. So you're talking about a huge, huge problem set. And when you look at other conflict zones, like in total, there are 60 countries within the UN that are affected by explosive ordnance or munitions. When you look at what that means for either the global sustainment objectives or even just food security or somebody able to even make a living for themselves, that's a way larger issue. What I was doing in Iraq was primarily clearing farmland from improvised explosive devices. And so when you look at the actual field, you can see like this land is like completely fallow now and probably will actually never grow in the next probably 25 years without a ton of fertilizer, without a ton of tilling in order to kind of repair that soil, because it's been treated like that for millennia in this case. And because it lost at this point almost a decade of usage, that land it barely will grow anything even on it. And that's then affecting the farmers. I mean, there were plenty of accidents that happen from that as well. It really is a huge mounting issue that detection technology just isn't there to like solve. Within 25 years, we're probably still not going to have a drone system that's going to scan the ground, tell you where every mine is, go fly a charge out there and blow it up. And even if it does blow it up, okay, now you're contaminating the soil. So was it really like worth it to do that? And then what happens if that system misses something because it hasn't been tested time and time again over decades? And then also just from a robotics and system standpoint, like if we want to argue like, oh, we have AI and it's going to replace everybody's jobs, or we have robots and they're going to solve this mine problem. I would argue like, we've tried this in the auto industry in a standardized environment. Same cars going off the line every single day from this line. It's inside. Nothing's changing. And we can't even get robots to do that correctly today. So how do we expect to do that in a landmine field? We can do it better. We can definitely use some of these detection technologies and stuff that we're doing to train more EOD technicians. One of the things that we do is create synthetic data sets from the models that we're collecting or the information that we're collecting. So we're now actually aiding in creating computer vision models that are detecting landmines in Ukraine, like today, with our technology. I think that's the way, is we actually start looking at componentizing what actually can create a system instead of trying to create a system from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the first step is information, of course. I mean, that you need to, just as in every problem, like the first step is that you realize the problem and then start like gathering information about it. And then obviously there are different kinds of tools to remove the mines eventually. But the first thing is to find them, right? And to see what it is.
Yeah, and to be honest, it's not even like finding all of them. It's just finding where the contamination starts and where you believe that it ends, and then starting that clearance process from there. When you look at like mechanical clearance and everything, not that isn't great and doesn't really, it solves problems and everything. You're talking about beating up the earth and blowing things up if you hit something. Even then, like what they're actually doing is they're trying to define the edges of what this contamination or where this contamination is. And then they're focusing their efforts on that. And so people look at what's going on in the world and mine clearances like we just go out there and we clear the mines. Now, it's more of a health safety approach of like, where's the contaminated community? Where's the actual contamination itself? And how do we reduce that risk all the way to this is the minefield? And that's the real problem set that we're trying to help solve, even from an EODynamics standpoint, and at least from an industry standpoint, where we should be focusing.
Yeah, because I think that really opened my eyes a little bit. It's not just about safety for people. It's also about, like you mentioned there, with farmland. Like it's an economic and it has societal impact in the communities that are affected. It's not just safety per se.
Yeah, and even from a clearance standpoint, there is economic benefit for these people to be clearing the mines or using the economy itself to help clear the mines. Like, those are jobs, that is work. Ideally, not truly productive work. Like, it would be if you took the exact same people, the exact same money, very similar equipment, and looked at like producing a product, like making a tractor or adding value to the economy. You're always gonna win with that kind of economic outlook. But until that ground's cleared, nothing's happening.
Yeah.
So even those jobs that are being produced, or those EOD technicians that are being produced, there's still some economic recovery that's occurring. And I would even argue like that those clearance activities and everything creates land ownership. It creates a sense of purpose. It creates a whole bunch of truly positive things in that community to see them actually solve that problem from themselves with some sort of support from outside. Adding to the recovery efforts, building a new house, buying a new car or something like that, until they can get to a point of self-sustainment again, whether it's tilling the land or recovering that oil factory or the machinery factory down the road after a submunition attack. So yeah, although robots, great, awesome, help solve some problems, like that kind of approach still has a truly beneficial impact instead of waiting 5 years for this robot system to come if it's going to actually do what you're saying it's going to do.
Yeah, and I think there's an overemphasis on, like you mentioned before, hallelujah, technology that's going to do everything. I think you mentioned it also, the extreme amount of time that will be required to clear just Ukraine. I think we need to look at all kinds of different technologies and really utilize innovation to try out different technologies, and then we will see what works and what doesn't, and like waiting for the perfect technology to help everything. I mean, there are people getting blown up, people that can't use their farmland today, and it's a problem right now, and I think we need to turn every stone and look at everything to really get this going.
Yeah, and I think you hit like a really good point. Yeah, and I don't want anybody to think like I'm not advocating for like innovation. I love that. But it has to be innovation with a purpose. Like, there could be a research phase and an information gathering phase and all that. But when you actually look at what you're trying to create, it needs to be the small, easy victories, because as soon as you get a stream of those, then you can create like, okay, this is a better way to fly drones and collect information, or this is a better way to utilize a mechanical asset to conduct technical survey, or hey, this is a better way to render safe an item so it's not producing even more contamination, at least from a chemical standpoint, into the soil. And yeah, I think, yeah, we kind of already talked about that, taking little bites where we can and looking at that as the innovative effort, not this one singing, all dancing system that's never going to work.
And you already have it makes sense. I mean, it's and you already have the technology out being used right now, right?
Yeah. So our headset application, we have a US customer that's utilizing that right now. Our mobile application is used literally all over the world, everywhere from South America to Australia, Europe, and the United States. We've got customers in Canada for our 3D models, and are working on a deal currently with a German company to produce them in Germany as well. And yeah, our synthetic data sets being used in a computer vision model today for a client. So yeah, we have a reach. It's slow because we only started in September, like in true earnest. But yeah, we're growing, gaining traction, and actually showing like immediate value everywhere where we can have an impact.
Oh, that's great, because I think we need more innovation and startups when it comes to defense and security. I mean, it's the most important job there is, right? And for a long time, there has been sort of a stigma. You couldn't get CSR, so this sort of indices where you can't get investments because you're not qualified as a I don't know the English word, hållbarhet is the Swedish one, but you can't get investments because you're classified as an arms export. It's just so, stupid, for lack of a better word. And I think it's switching a little bit now, right? I think with people understanding.
I think the environment's gotten a lot better over the past couple of years, and obviously with like the move to NATO, the conflict in Europe, like all those things kind of compounding on itself. And from like don't get me wrong, the military does a lot of great things. It also does a lot of horrible things. And there's looking at weapon systems and what we've created, if we just put like a tenth of that effort into solving like some world problem, the world will be so much of a better place. Yeah. But on the flip side of that, like if you're not willing to protect that, then you probably don't deserve it because you're not willing to actually sacrifice for it. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt that said, like, speak softly and carry a big stick. Like, be humble, be nice, but be fair, be ready to defend every last inch of what you've got in the case of you need to do that. Because if not, someone will absolutely take it. We have millennia of human history of us taking other people's things and being real nasty and horrible to each other. To expect that, I don't know, something in the world system has changed significantly, that's not going to happen. I would argue it's a better environment that everybody kind of understands the rules and has their own stick to poke each other in the eye with than it is to think hopes and dreams are going to save us at the end of the day. Probably not popular opinion, but I kind of take.
I think that's human nature, and I think we talked about it a lot on the podcast before. Is that especially in Sweden, because we had sort of peace for 200 years, we have this notion or this false narrative that everybody's like us. I mean, we don't really need to do war. It's not very modern to be in a war. But the thing is that there are other people out there with sticks that will try to take what you have if you don't have your own stick. So, I think, unfortunately, that's the case. That's human nature. I don't think it will ever change, but we will see. So what's the next steps for you guys right now? You're working on different projects like you mentioned, but what's the next step?
So we've got an event in Croatia that we're going to on May 20th, Mine Action Symposium. We're currently working an investment round right now, and things are looking positive there. We still need a little bit more, but considering our burn rate and everything, I think we're going to be really good. I mean, everything that I've done up until this point has been $50,000. So it's not like a little bit and actually caring and looking at a problem like can really, really go a long way if you apply it correctly. We're hoping to raise some funds to really flesh out the team. We've got a ton of really wonderful, really great interns that we're trying to hire here shortly because their internships coming to a close. So ideally, we'd like to actually be able to keep those personnel because we've built trust. We've built a team that really I'm truly proud of. Just continuing to try to grow what we have and our products and everything. We have meetings almost weekly with people wanting to learn more or trying to understand exactly what we're doing. Our training system and what we've done has already been used in Ukraine once. So we're actually looking most likely in August, pushing out for another training course. Things have there's obviously ebbs and flows in the conflict. Historically, spring to fall is and through the summer is the fighting season, and that's just what it is. And unfortunately, due to some procurement issues with the actual training organization, that was kind of kicked down the road until this most recent offensive, which has then forced the training audience staff to go, we can't train right now. We have actual problems to solve. Mainly just continue to grow, try to get in funds, do more sales, and hopefully do some actual good.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I really hope you succeed, and I mean, we need more smart people and driven people in this whole industry for sure. So I mean, all fingers crossed for you guys. And if you want to learn more, you have EOD EODynamics.co. Is there somewhere else you would like to send people if they want to learn more and connect with you on LinkedIn, perhaps?
Yeah, I've got a fairly big LinkedIn audience. Be sure to hit me up there. And then also LinkedIn on our actual page. We share a ton of information, not just about our products, but about different mines, things going on in the community, the impact of what we're doing, or what mine action is truly about, to help educate as much people. So even if we're not the technology that's solving it, at least people are better educated on what the problem set is, what are the actual challenges that people on the ground are facing, and hopefully building a community that actually is looking for a sustainable actual product that kind of helps pays everybody and solves the actual problem at hand to make this world a little bit better place.
Yeah, everybody needs to chip in if we're going to have a better world. That's for sure. Well, thank you so much, Charlie. Is there something else you would like to touch on?
Nope. I think that's it, Max. I really appreciate you having me on, the opportunity and the conversations that we've had before, even if it was a little contentious. But sincerely, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we have you're doing a great job, so I wish you all the best. And to everyone else listening, before you go, you can help us by giving this video a like if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcast, please consider giving us a review. And if you've, after you've done that, given us that 5-star review, share this episode with someone who you think will benefit from hearing it. Spread it, and we'll get more people involved. That helps us reach more people, and that's good for everyone. You can also support by sending me a coffee. All the links in the description below. And if you want to work with me as a coach or a leader trainer, you can schedule a free call, also a description below. If you want to talk to Charlie or Daniel on EOD Dynamics, visit their website or connect on LinkedIn. I will also put all those links below this episode. And as always, our thoughts go out to those holding the line, keeping the rest of us safe so that we might enjoy living our lives in freedom. To all the police, all the armed forces employees and volunteers, customs, Coast Guard, first responders, everyone, thank you for your service. And for everyone that has been injured or has died during conflicts or exercises at home or abroad, you are never forgotten. And today, an extra thank you to Charlie and his Marine colleagues, and also to all the persons working in the defense industry, trying to innovate and creating more technology out there that helps keep us free. I'm at YouTube and all the other social medias at Max Villman. Charlie and EODynamics are also on LinkedIn, and you can search for them and check them out in the links below. Until next time, this is Max and Charlie. Fly safe. Och behöver du eller ditt företag min hjälp att komma vidare och låsa upp nästa nivå, ja, då ska ni klicka på länken nere i beskrivningen och boka ett kostnadsfritt strategimöte med mig, där vi ser om det är en bra matchning för oss att arbeta med varandra.